Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the Mechen V06 voice recorder / MP3 player. And recently, we also checked out their Mechen H10 DAP or digital audio player. It has a larger touchscreen, technically running on Android, a little bit more powerful, allowing for music streaming with built-in Wi-Fi. However, I actually think that this one might be a slightly better value. And to be honest, I think it's a bit more unique, just because the H10 in terms of hardware is very similar to just a entry-level or budget phone, whereas this thing has a much more different looking design to it. It's also crafted out of zinc alloy, so it has a metal finish instead of being built out of plastic, actually feeling a little bit more premium, in addition to touting higher quality mics if you are using it for voice recording, as well as selling for a more affordable price as well. It actually goes for only around $30 with some discounts that can bring it down even lower. So it's actually less than half the cost of the H10. And also, I actually prefer the mechanical or physical buttons at the bottom of this player because it makes it less easy to accidentally trigger if you're wearing gloves, if your hands are sweaty, for example. It's a bit more tactile and satisfying, similar to iPods back in the day. So we have easy launch keys for recording, going back, as well as navigating around the UI, deleting certain tracks, and going back and forth. So in terms of some of the quick top-line specs, before we take a closer look at the performance, it features 144 gigabytes of storage, pretty impressive for a $30 device. However, it's actually a 128 gigabyte micro SD card that comes pre-installed out of the box, and then the device itself has 16 gigabytes of onboard storage. So they're adding these two together to get the 144 gigabytes. It also touts a 2-inch display, which is, interestingly enough, having rounded corners here on the edges, as you can tell there, which in my opinion also makes it look a little bit more premium than it really is. Touts easy recording with a single click of a key, including access to voice-activated recording mode as well, so if it detects sound nearby, it can also automatically start recording. Also featuring some automatic recording durations. You can have presets of 30, 60, 90, or 120 minutes. If you don't want to press on the stop key, you can set it up to do this automatically, and also features a line-in recording as well. So if you plug it in using a 3.5mm cable to something like another MP3 player, DAP, or even a phone, you can also record the audio source that's being played back, which is actually quite unique. The microphone and recordings are also claimed to be up to 3072 kilobits per second with 24-bit resolution, which is actually quite impressive. It's approaching hi-fi quality compared to the typical 16-bit recordings of more budget-oriented voice recorders that we've seen previously. Also touts a little bit of noise cancellation as well using the mics, so some basic noises including fan sounds in the background should get slightly repressed when you are speaking, making the recordings a little bit more clear, picking up sound 360 degrees there on the very top. You can even set a password to protect the device when it's not in use, and furthermore, you can also use this as a MP3 player as well. It doesn't have to only be used as a voice recorder, even though it has a little bit more advanced features in that department with higher end microphones on the top. If you're just listening to MP3s, WMAs, or even lossless resolution tracks like FLAC, it can still play it back directly on the device's built-in storage. So the 3.5mm jack on the bottom here can be used for both line in as well as line out, which is why, again, I do think this is a slightly better value in terms of the hardware, as long as you don't need streaming or Wi-Fi, that is. Now, in terms of the battery life, it's 660 milliamp hours, and it will last for around 70 hours of music playback. Also going to be longer compared to some of the Android players, which can get you around 15 hours of continuous listening, just because the Android operating system will drain a little bit more juice. The processor is also not quite as energy efficient, so this is another plus on a more basic model like this. So yeah, I think this one is actually quite cool and definitely a step up compared to some of the budget, more generic voice recorders that we've seen previously. It's kind of like a music player, voice recorder hybrid. That being said, it's still relatively simple in terms of operation. There is no optional wireless companion app support, for example, on a phone, unlike something like the Plod Note, which is kind of a smarter AI-based voice recorder, which might be overkill to some people. However, that device allowed you to have transcription capability. So when you sync the notes over to your phone, it also gave you a text version that you can read, copy and paste, and even using some large language models to generate some summaries, as well as key points to synthesize the information that's being recorded. So you don't really get some of those additional software features. It still is more of a traditional voice recorder at the end of the day. However, it does have a pretty nice microphone in addition to a solid build, easy to slide into a pocket when you are traveling or on the go. Now, inside of the packaging here, you'll find a quick user guide plus a 3.5mm to 3.5mm cable, again for line in recording, as well as a Type-C cable here for charging and data transfer, plus a kind of freebie pair of headphones as well for music listening, although for the best audio quality, it's probably worth investing in a slightly more premium pair of headphones yourself, just because the bundled pair is rather basic. And now just a closer look at the design of the player, aside from the controls on the front, including that easy one-click recording button. Again, everything here crafted out of metal. We have the aforementioned 128GB pre-installed micro SD card, as well as a manual on-off slider key, pretty quick to boot because unlike Android or an iOS device, the operating system is much more lightweight. So even if it's completely off, it can wake up in under 5 seconds, relatively quick. Now let's take a closer look here at the screen. So you can tap again on the middle key to unlock it to prevent any accidental triggers if it's in your pocket, for example. And this 2-inch panel is a IPS display, so it offers decent viewing angles. If you're looking at it from slightly off axes, you can see that colors aren't really washing out too dramatically, which is nice. That being said, it isn't fully laminated, so there's still a slight air gap between the glass here and the LCD underneath, as you can tell. So this is one area where they cut a little bit on the cost, but overall, definitely not shabby for the price that it's sitting at. The menu here is pretty easy to navigate. You can find some basic time information on the top, battery status, and then we can cycle through functions like music, advanced settings, kind of a folder for file management, and then all of your voice recording files are going to end up in that other folder. So if we want to start recording, we simply have to tap on the red recording key, and you can see that the recording just begins there automatically. By default, it's saved in a WAV file format, and it is a stereo recorder with left and right microphones, as you can tell there, that are both picking up the sound. You'll also see a, by the way, microphone here on the side for playing back your recordings, even if you don't plug in a pair of headphones, which is pretty convenient. Tap on it again to stop the recording. That being said, what you won't find on this device would be Bluetooth either. Perhaps that would have been an interesting extra if you wanted to record wirelessly from a phone that's connected to it, or if you want to connect a pair of wireless headphones to it. But at this price, I would say it's a reasonable compromise. Right microphones. As you can tell there, they're both picking up the sound, and an equalizer there is happening in real time. You'll also see by the way, microphone on the side. So overall, the microphone quality is doing a surprisingly good job. It doesn't sound too tinny. It's picking up the voice with enough detail. Now, one thing I will say though is if you are clicking on the button for starting and stopping the recording, some of these clicks also do get recorded into partially the sound. So in an ideal scenario, you'll tap on start and then maybe wait a split second before starting to talk for the clearest audio. And also maybe if there is an optional accessory like a condenser sponge in the future, that could also maybe block out a little bit more of wind noise if you are moving the device around, but overall it still is straightforward and working well enough. Tapping on the menu key also allows us to check out some additional advanced settings, including repeating the track or shuffling the order of tracks. In fact, the number of times that you want it to repeat can also be customized here as well. For example, 5 times versus 2 times. Under sound settings, you can also find some basic equalizer options, including rock, funk, hip hop, jazz, which might be better suited if you are playing back music, for example, including a custom one here as well that gives you a frequency slider to further play around with. So actually really not bad. There's even variable playback speed. So for example, if you find the recording to be too slow, you can speed it up to be 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, as well as setting some basic bookmark functions here as well. Which, speaking of, let's actually try recording another track here. This is our second recording, and this time around, we can actually tap on some functions here like the T mark, and this allows us to assign some bookmarks as parts of the recording that we can then easily go back into the specific points. So if we go back to this recording and now tap on the bookmark section, we can go into the Find Bookmarks tab, and we can see the different points in time that we actually clicked on that particular key, and then jump into that part of the recording if it's a longer session or part of a lecture or meeting, for example. Now, maybe only one feature that I would have liked to see built into the hardware would be a dedicated volume rocker, maybe on the side, for easily changing the volume higher and lower during playback. Since right now you have to rely on the D-pad, and if you are in the system list view while you are playing back something in the background, you have to kind of return to the previous playback page to change the volume level. So having some built-in buttons would have been nice for volume control. Aside from that though, it's pretty easy to navigate. Some additional properties settings that you can change include recording from the built-in microphone versus the line-in. Gain settings here can also be played around with in terms of the microphone sensitivity. For example, if you're trying to pick up sound from further away, you can increase the sensitivity. However, the microphone will be more susceptible to some interference, and you have to be a bit more careful if you're moving really closely to the mic not to speak too loudly. There's also the noise reduction functionality. You have different levels to play with, so level 1 here all the way up to level 7 in terms of higher to lower intensity. Now, if you are confident that you're recording a relatively quiet space, having the noise cancellation be turned off is going to technically give you the best quality in terms of the recording. Maybe if you're trying to record some music, for example, just because it isn't applying any digital processing on top of the audio track, giving you the cleanest recording. However, if you are in a more busy or crowded space, just for speech and conversations, you can activate that mode if needed. In terms of recording format, you can choose between WAV and MP3 file formats, as well as turn on and off segment recording, again automatically having it save after X minutes. The only setting that would have been nice to see added is the ability to change the resolution of the audio tracks. By default, it's always going to be at 24-bit, but maybe if you want to lower the resolution to something like 16-bit, perhaps to take up less space, it would have been nice to give you that resolution toggle. And jumping back into the main home screen, under more advanced settings, you can find screensaver options like the digital clock that we saw there earlier after it times out. You can also activate the password here, setting a 4-digit combination to unlock, as well as a sleep timer. After X minutes of inactivity, it will then go to sleep to preserve on power. And then from here, you can also change, again, the time and date settings because it isn't really connected to a phone or app. Also checking out some basic player information in terms of firmware, as well as the disk space which is remaining on the memory card, as well as the internal storage. As for system languages, here's the full list of 28 which it supports as part of the menus and navigation. If you aren't fluent here in English, you can find any of these other languages to cycle through instead. And then for display setting, you can also activate and change the brightness control. So this is going to be the maximum level of the screen. Really not bad. As long as you're in a more shaded region, you can still make it out without too many issues, as well as lower the screen brightness progressively if you are in a darker space and you want to consume less power. Let's take a quick look at the music playback aspect here next. You'll be able to find options including playing back all songs, as well as sorting by artist, albums, and genre information as well, or custom playlists that you can create again on the device. Also, if you've inserted a new memory card, you have to tap on refresh here first so that can find all of the tracks located on the storage of the card before showing it up, and afterwards you'll see the information presented in alphabetical order by default. So if we tap on one of the tracks over here, you can see it then starts to play back, and honestly, in terms of the file format support, it's not bad. It can definitely play back all of the aforementioned MP3s, WMAs, FLAC resolution, lossless tracks as well. And during the music playback menu here, if you swipe on the up and down keys, this will correlate to volume going higher and lower. Although maybe one aspect of the software that doesn't seem to be perfect would be supporting cover art information. Right now, it mostly tends to be just a blank kind of visualization, as you can tell there, versus on some of the other more premium music players tend to have slightly more universal cover art support. But aside from that aspect, you can still see the name of the track here on the top, as well as your current part in the track. You can also scrub to go ahead to a certain section, and then release there to play back from that part. Overall, all the controls are working well enough from a responsiveness point of view. The sound quality itself is also very clean. There is no hints of any distortion or static coming from the headphone jack. It's pretty tight and clean signal coming out, which is great. Sufficient volume as well to drive even slightly more powerful or larger headphones without any problems. And I can confirm that it's rather faithful to the original recording when it comes to the audio experience. Definitely a pretty nice music player if you want to just tuck into your pocket, if you're taking to the gym, listening in the car, or walking around with. The entire thing just feeling very lightweight and again pretty easy to control. And if you're pairing a higher quality FLAC track with some more premium headphones, this can get you perhaps slightly better audio quality compared to a wireless pair of headphones, which is still going to be inherently a bit more of a lossy signal. It's more convenient, sure, but as part of the transmission via Bluetooth, it's still compressing some of the detail versus a wired connection like this, which is why wired headphones are still used by audiophiles and hi-fi enthusiasts to this day. Now, that being said, the specific DAC, or the digital to analog chip inside, isn't really explicitly advertised on their product page that we saw there from earlier. So it's probably something that isn't quite as high-end compared to more premium DAPs or digital audio players on the market, which will explicitly call that out in terms of the bit rate as well as the DSD signals protocols that it supports. On here, it's probably more of a basic chip that they have, but still it's loud, clear, and sufficient from a detail perspective for just casual music listening. We have, again, access to pretty similar settings here as well in terms of looping certain tracks as well as adding to our own playlist. Furthermore, even in the audio player mode, you can still activate virtual bookmarks when you are listening to a track. So this might be also helpful if you're in a certain album or a longer audiobook and you want to just come back to a specific point. So yeah, aside from the cover art information being a little bit more hit or miss, everything else in terms of the ability to sort by artists as well as albums all seems to be working without too many problems when it comes to basic music playback. Actually, a little bit better than expected. But that is essentially it in terms of the feature set. Maybe a couple of other extras that would have been interesting to see would have been maybe a built-in FM radio. That is something we saw on the H10 MP3 player, for example. So if you are in a pinch, you're trying to hear the news, that could be a nice extra. But right now it is really focused on just the recording capability as well as the music playback aspects. Furthermore, you don't really get a photo viewer or a video viewer part, but again, on a smaller screen like this, I would say it still is mostly reasonable for what it offers. So there we have it. That's more or less it as far as our hands-on look at the Mechen V06 voice recorder. Again, this is a pretty basic, no-frills voice recorder, all things considered, but it gets the job done, and at the price point here of $30, I think it's really not bad. Solid music playback plus audio recording using the stereo microphones on the top at a simple click of a key. Pretty good for quick memos, notes, lectures, and meetings alike. Could also work in cases where you are not allowed to bring a phone or any wireless device using, again, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or cellular. Maybe in certain school settings, for example, this might be something to consider instead. You can check out more details if interested in the links down below. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That has been the Mechen V06